welcome to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Reminder, we're streaming live on Sportsnet's YouTube channel and airing live on Sportsnet 360 Monday to Friday from 2 to 3 p.m. Make sure you find the Raptors Show wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe, and please rate and review the show. I'm your host, William Lou, and I am joined by Blake Murphy on a Tuesday. Producer?
Blake Murphy.
On a show that has your own theme music, you know, so we don't even have our own theme music.
You could, though.
I mean, I guess, yeah. I mean, you know what? Actually, technically, Alex has his own theme music. He did unveil some of his freestyle raps on the show last season. This year, he's not doing it as much because
you want me to do that at some point too?
If you have some, I would love to hear it. You got some mom spaghetti in that locker?
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, Raptors.
I called for delivery about an hour ago.
Man.
Raptors 4-1 on Mondays now, so this has been like a run of positive Blake Murphy Tuesdays.
Yeah. That's right.
I like it.
I think last week when we did our 20 stats at the quarter mark of the
season.
Pistons.
Oh no, that was the week before Pistons.
Right. Yeah. One of the meme stats I brought in was that the Raptors had yet to lose on weekdays and had yet to win, I think, on weekends or something like that.
Good thing you got that stat out while you could.
Yes, yeah.
Both
Turns
of those
out, the day
ended.
of the week doesn't actually impact anything with the result, to be honest. Maybe just Sunday for opponents coming to Scotiabank Arena, who also got to spend Saturday in Toronto. But yeah,
it's one of those things where the Raptors actually don't want opponents on a back-to-back sometimes.
Right. Yes.
You'd rather them have the off night here.
Well, one of the things we talked about too was just teams. I know the Raptors had played a tough schedule at that point, but the Raptors are coming up on a stretch where a lot of teams were coming out on the second night of back-to-backs.
Mm-hmm.
And Cleveland, I thought, look, the Raptors did a really good job locking them down, holding them to 88 points. That's the lowest opposing point total since December 10th, where the Raptors beat the Knicks. This is back in 2021, last year. So pretty much the whole calendar year, 88 points is a really, really good result for the Raptors. And I thought that defensively they were strong. We'll talk about that. But at the same time, they had just played second night of a back-to-back. They had just played in Detroit the game before that. They actually struggled with Detroit, which is funny.
Their whole team has also been sick, like the Raptors team. You've got Chetty Osman leaking fluids on the court, and then Jared Allen, Kevin Love, Lamar Stevens were all out.
Yeah.
And those all seemed like the kind of outs that the Raptors have had lately, where
right.
Oh, your knee's sore, and also you got this illness that's been going around, and Fred's 3 weeks in and still feeling it. And so the Cavs had a little bit of that, but that's why last week we point out stats hey, you have the most rest advantage games remaining on the schedule, because you see in a game like last night how that has an impact.
Yeah. And even just listening to their coach JB Bickerstaff speak before the game, gave some great quotes about Pascal's growth over the years, shared some good perspective about guys like Evan and Scotty and the expectations that they have coming into the second year, and talking about how, when players want to be great, they shouldn't shy away from expectations. So he was kind of fully embracing that, both for his own player and also, on behalf of Scotty, I guess, as well. But
kind of similar sophomore years for them.
Oh,
okay? Where it's
we'll talk about it. It was a bit of a battle of mid yesterday. I'm not gonna lie to you.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's going to be the headline item in any Raptors Cavs game for the foreseeable future. It's
okay.
Scotty edged him for Rookie of the Year, obviously. Evan Mobley, when I tune in, has looked ahead of Scotty Barnes defensively.
Yeah,
and they're asking him to do a lot more as a hub offensively, and that's pretty up and down. The big difference being, I think, that Scotty is maybe a little more comfortable at this stage in the in-between game, and Evan Mobley is significantly more comfortable dealing with contact and getting to the free throw line.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't even have this on the rundown, to be honest, because it didn't really feel like a main determinant of yesterday's game. But watching it, my impression is just I don't think Evan is very good at initiating offense right now. He kind of has a little bit of a predictableness to his game. There's not a catch you by surprise kind of thing with him. Obviously, he's effective at the basket because he's pretty big, and he's even for a slight guy, pretty physical down low. So he's able to finish through contact, or at least get to the free throw line where he's good. But the jumper is inconsistent for him. I wasn't surprised to see that he was shooting under 30% from the season. just based on his performance last night from
And
three. I think
he's
he was,
not
like,
taking many either.
yeah, and you know, a lot of the mid-range game stuff, like I think people kind of compared, like one of the popular comps was like Chris Bosh or Kevin Garnett, right? Which is setting the bar really high, but you kind of get it, right? Like a lanky big like that who, you know, has that perimeter skill, who shows flashes and it looks really nice. Those are some really skilled bigs to compare yourself to. Have you seen like young KG? Even forget the jumpers and stuff like that. Just watch some of the young KG in Team USA practices and stuff. Like it's terrifying what he could do. And obviously, as Raptor fans, we know what Chris Bosh could do.
And then Chris
So-
Bosh, when he left, obviously in Toronto was the hub of the offense, and maybe assist totals weren't always there and stuff, but
He got
he
up to
was
5 at one point. you
yeah,
know?
and he was the number one guy. Like everything ran through him on teams where a lot of the pieces didn't fit. And then when he went to Miami, he changed his role, but he basically became what every team in the NBA has been chasing since, as a like defend and little things center. Like someone obviously with a high skill level, but who just defends like crazy, rebounds, and then on offense gets his where he can.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. I thought
Yeah, if he turned into Chris Bosh and you used Chris Bosh as you would in 2023 or 2022, I guess.
right.
Yeah, he'd probably be a Hall of Famer too.
Yeah. And by the way, it's not even like Mobley had a bad game last night. I actually thought when you look at the box score, like he had like a pretty big double-double, right? 15 rebounds, you know. But at the same time, I think they needed more offensive creation from him. And I think that a lot of times the Raptors were able to hold him down.
Especially on a night where Donovan Mitchell didn't really have it.
Yeah. Was he sick too? Like what was going on with him? Or do you think that's just OG? Is that the OG?
I mean, man, the OG stuff is getting to the point where like
The propaganda makes us off at this point. I mean, come on.
It's
You
not
got
even-
a guy who's got 121 straight games with double-digit scoring.
it's not even
snapped.
propaganda at this point, because it's not coming from Toronto anymore. Like the call is not coming from inside the house. You're just on NBA Twitter, and like Jared Dubin last night is like, this is just send this tape
Yeah.
to voters instead of like an actual campaign. And you're seeing it from smart people around NBA. Obviously, Zach Lowe's been on the OG as an elite defender train forever. Nikias, you run into fans of other teams who are like, holy crap. Like if there are Mavs fans out there, I'm sure they were like, damn.
You know they were impressed when they were like, we need to find a way to get OG on our team
Yeah.
and help Luka.
Yeah. That's honestly, that might be the biggest tell, is like if we could track, like, you know how Google tracks search terms? If we could track trade machine terms.
I think you could actually do that on one of the other trade machines, not the ESPN one, but the other.
Oh, the trade NBA or whatever. See
There's-
how
there's,
often
like,
guys are getting
players
thrown in.
who are most often thrown in there, which I gotta say, it's kind of funny to think about, because it's the top of the list is always like Westbrook and then like Miles Turner, you know, just Laker fans trying to make that deal happen. By the way, shout out to Andrew Nemhard with the game winner over LeBron last night. Man, I obviously I think the Raptors are pretty happy with Christian Koloko, but I do wonder if Nemhard just dropped like 3 or 4 more spots.
Fairly confident
what
he'd
the
be a
Raptors-
Raptors.
Yeah, I know Nick Nurse said after one of the workouts, it's like that's the best workout we've seen at anybody in our gym this year.
And they've been attached to him for a long time, right? Like he was with the Canada basketball program. He's been with the program for a long time, but like he was the honorary young guy that travels with the senior team, even if you're not expected to have a big role. And he is kind of what the Raptors look for as like a longer, super smart point guard type.
Yes,
I think he would have been a Raptor if he's
also same agency as Pascal.
there. You
I
go.
think that helps. You know, it's just good relationships all around. But anyway, shout out to Andrew Nemhard. But yeah, I mean, like I thought, just last night's game was just really refreshing to watch. Like defensively, that level. I mean, yes, the Cavs really could not shoot the 3 at all, and you know, you do expect them to shoot a little bit better than 18%, 7 of 38. But at the same time, I thought the Raptors did a really good job of forcing the right guys to shoot. You're more or less okay with Dean Wade shooting 6 threes. You're more or less okay even with Evan Mobley shooting 4 threes. He's not an efficient 3-point shooter at this point in his career. You're pretty happy with Chetty Osman and, you know, Isaac Okoro in particular. These guys kind of guys. It's just like you can obviously you want to run them off the line, but you want to pressure them. And most importantly, you want to force the ball out of, you know, Garland's hands and Mitchell's hands. And I think OG obviously led the charge against Mitchell. I mean, my God, his defense was amazing there. But even against Garland, I mean, like, say for a short stretch there in the second quarter where the Raptors defensively kind of came undone, mostly because they had some bad shots at the start of the second quarter there with Pascal out. Yeah, they did really well defensively. There's a lot of defensive highlights from this game.
Yeah, you mentioned it was the fewest points they've given up in almost a calendar year. Third best defensive performance of the season when we look at when we adjust for pace. And perhaps the most notable one, you mentioned how poorly Cleveland shot. Short of that win against Miami about a month ago, this is the worst an opponent has shot. And that's been something to track because, as Eric Kareen has pointed out at The Athletic, as people will tweet every once in a while when they look at the leaderboards, it's really, really hard to be a top 10 defense and a top 10 team in net rating while the effective field goal percentage or the true shooting percentage you're giving up is among the highest in the league. Now you can tiptoe and do that, and the Raptors do that by forcing a ton of turnovers and getting way more shots than the other team, just not letting the opponent shoot a lot. But if you want to look for games where their defense is really on, I think that's like they're always going to get their turnovers.
Yeah.
They didn't really as much last night, but usually, like more often than not, they're going to get their turnovers. It's can you limit the other team's shooting? And you know, some of that is shot spectrum, some of that is 3-point variance. But I don't know. I came away from last night pretty impressed. Like even shorthanded, that's a pretty good Cavs team. Like that's still a Cavs starting lineup that has 3 guys in it that Cavs Twitter will say should be in the All-Star game.
Yeah, the team of 4 All-Stars had 3 of them last night, but only scored 88 points. It's a tough look.
I mean, the Raptors only scored 100, and they've got like 7 All-Stars.
That's fine, man. It's only because if Pascal played more than 30 minutes, I think, I don't think scoring was an issue for the Raptors last night. No, I think one thing with watching the defense last night, especially watching it back this morning, is just like the Raptors didn't sell out defensively to knock out Mitchell or even Garland. Like, you know, they did a good job, obviously, showing them a crowd, especially in the paint, you know, deterring them from 3-point shots. But at the same time, like they put a lot of length on those guys. Those guys are smaller. Obviously, they're guards, right? And the Raptors only have forwards, as we know. And they didn't have to sell out. Instead, the Raptors were really solid in the paint. The only times I think the Raptors really came undone just a little bit was more on the offensive glass, right? I thought Mobley was active on that front. Robin Lopez is just he's just a load to handle down there. He's so big.
Okoro had a bunch as well.
Yeah,
They're just
Okoro.
kind of chaos ones.
You know, Okoro's the type of rebounder where no one's guarding him in the corner, so that means no one's blocking him out.
He does,
So
and
he does get in there a couple
I don't
times.
want to take a shot at Chris Boucher because he had a very, very good game on Saturday and was just about one of the only Raptors off the bench the last month to put anything together. But Okoro also had a little bit of that. Oh, you have a bunch of offensive rebounds because you shot 1 for 11.
Yeah.
And Boucher had that against Dallas. I think he still got to his double-double, but he shot very poorly and yeah.
Yeah. Once again, this is a Chris Boucher propaganda program, so I'm going to remain
Yeah,
silent
that's
until
coming up
until December 12th, and then afterwards we'll have more. I'm kidding. No, it was a tough night for Chris. I agree. But you know, I thought the Raptors defensively were just really, really strong. And of course, like, you know, you pair that with the fact that you have the confidence that, you know what, I might not necessarily need to gamble for as many steals tonight because we can just give the ball to Pascal like every trip down and he'll just score. I mean, I don't know what the specific analysis that we can kind of try to do. And, you know, it looked like obviously the mid-range game was working for him and he even hit a fading 3 in the corner off a baseline inbound with 1.4 seconds left. But my overall my general take on Pascal's performance last night was just that boy nice.
Yeah. You
I
tweeted
don't
the
know,
meme.
He's really nice, man.
He is.
He scored at will last night.
And like the final line of 18, 11, and 5 is good.
Sure, yeah.
But like he only played 30 minutes and he forced nothing. Like him coming out right off the top and being like, boom, 2 difficult buckets in the paint. It's like, okay, that's established. And you see, this isn't all Siakam, but one of the popular stats going around during Siakam's absence was what the team shot from 3 before he went down and after he went down.
Yes.
And there was a huge swing. And that's not like Siakam shooting 34% on threes. That is not because you're missing Pascal Siakam as a knockdown shooter. It's because you're missing Pascal Siakam as your best creator of offense for others, whether it's by passing or just sucking in defensive attention. It also moves, you know, OG from on ball to in the corner a little bit more. He knocks down 4 threes last night. Fred was still playing off the ball a bunch anyway, but him and Pascal have that synergy, especially in transition, where boom, Fred hits 3 threes and they're all really simple in the flow of things, except for one, I think that was kind of the tough rattle around one. So yeah, you see those gains. And I know we want to talk about the offensive side of this and some of the rotation stuff, but I'm curious, when you watch it back on defense, how much did you see? Like you talked about that the Raptors didn't quite gamble as much as maybe we're used to, and they weren't as hyper aggressive. Some of that, there was a funny play late in the game where Wancho's assignment appears to be just like guide your guy to OG, just like take him there. And Wancho's obviously like he's big enough and effortful enough. This is why it's so much easier to hide a big poor defender versus a small poor defender. And he's not poor. He's fine. He's just compared to the guys around him.
Yeah.
He's the guy you're going to hide. And yeah, it seemed like his assignment at one point was just like, get the guy to OG's side of the floor and let OG do chaos. But the other thing is, and this is, part of why maybe Gary's gambles haven't played out as well over the last couple weeks. And Achua is still not back for a couple weeks, but you have Pascal back. How much did you notice the effect of just having Pascal as a help defender? Because I still maintain, that this is the right setup of not always using him in the primary actions because he is probably your best help defender.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's not just that. I mean, you need him to carry such a big load for you offensively. There's no necessarily a need to like put him on the best guys. I think when he needs to, he can do a job. Like I thought last night he switched on to Darius Garland at one point, late shot clock, stayed with him. Oh, no surprise. I mean, I've seen Pascal go one-on-one against John Wall back when it was still prime John Wall in 2018.
Pascal's first 2 weeks in the NBA was like, go guard Melo, guard KD, guard LeBron.
Well, his first ever play, I think, was blocking KD in preseason.
Yeah.
This is when KD first joined the Warriors.
I remember writing a piece about it like the first or second week of the season, and Dwayne Casey was just like baptism by fire. Like he's going to be in there. And at that point, the way that roster was constructed, he's got like, if he wasn't going to be your best defender on the floor, like you were in trouble. That was not a good defensive starting five. And it's funny how it changed like pretty quickly where even bench mob year, we were all like, oh my God, like Pascal's so good defensively. He could be a lockdown guy. And then he actually got too good offensively and OG's obviously very good defensively, where it's just like, OG's that guy now. And at the tail end of last year, the very end of last year, it almost looked like we were getting to, well, OG's too good offensively. Precious can be that guy now. Obviously, there's been a step back there, but it's been really fun. And I think Pascal's super well suited to that, weak corner to help in the paint and also jump passing lanes and then just like
rebound and finish possessions.
And then the grab and go stuff off of defensive rebound, which he is, we love Boucher doing that. We love Scotty doing that, but Pascal is one of the very best in the entire league at that. And then the other thing is with Pascal's length and how well he closes out and his speed, that lets you zone up the weak side so much easier. Like if you help elsewhere and you want to go 4-on-3 on one side of the floor and you get into those awkward one guy's kind of shading two shooters, one in the corner, one on the wing, Siakam is your most capable guy of, stunting or closing out in a way that it gives your next guy time to recover back. And, you see the odd Boucher's the best at blocking threes. And you don't even get to that point if you don't have someone on that side of the floor that can give Boucher or whoever it is that extra split second to recover.
Yeah. And it defensively reminds me a little bit of the way Milwaukee uses Giannis. Now, of course, the Bucks play a very different defensive style just because they have different personnel, right? You have Brook Lopez, who's another defensive player of the year candidate. Who's able to really play a lot of drop coverage very effectively for you, and therefore Giannis can stay at home a lot and come over and block shots more often. But it's kind of the same deal where you have Pascal waiting along that baseline. He's able to operate. The rebounding point is something that's so underrated with Pascal because he's been leading the Raptors in rebounding, obviously when he's played. And last night 30 minutes he gets 11 rebounds, and that's not even him like fully up to speed yet. You know what I mean? And so he does a great job. And then I think offensively, it's always going to be the draw with him because his growth in that area over the years has just been really, really fun to watch. Like the fact that he made 7 shots last night. I think all of them were in the first half. The second half, the Cavs started double teaming a lot more. He was much more of a distributor, and other guys were able to score as well. But a lot of times there were tough buckets. Like the Cavs were actually playing him quite well. Okoro was trying to be in his jersey all night, pressing him up from like 30 feet plus. Right. Even Dean Wade, as much as the Raptors picked on Dean Wade, I thought Dean Wade was at least in position most times.
Look, there's a reason that guy's in the rotation and got good money. Like Dean Wade's a real player.
Yeah.
Just because he looks like me doesn't mean he can't defend at NBA level.
Yeah, I mean, he tried hard out there, but what I'm trying to say is Pascal's touch and the growth in his game. Even some things. One thing I like to watch for, obviously, because you can't really do this in real time when you're watching the game, either in person or on TV. But when you watch it back, just watch Pascal's footwork and how he gets to some of these shots. It's really, really nice.
Yeah, there's also that extra layer of, I mean, the passing is just, it's reached the point that we kind of tracked with DeMar, right? Is like, okay, as a rookie, just like score. And then you got to learn to score against defensive attention. And then you got to learn to score against defensive attention, but also pass out of that. And now Pascal's starting to flirt with that level of you're also manipulating the defense. So it's not only reacting, it's if I do this, I know they'll do that.
Yes.
So I can set this other thing up for myself or for someone else. There's also, he's really, over the years it's been up and down, but I think his ability to judge when to initiate contact and when to avoid contact in the paint has gotten sharper.
Yeah.
And you see it with some of those stop and starts. Obviously, the spin move, the Raptors need him. He only had 4 free throw attempts last night, and the Raptors didn't have a lot as a team, but that's going to be one of the things that is a big boost to this offense too, is Pascal's the only person on this team that can reliably get to the free throw line. So stat for you. Last night, the Raptors half-court offense on a per-possession basis, the best it had been since that October 31st 30-point blowout of the Hawks.
Whew. And Pascal was great in that one, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it was their third best half-court offense game of the season, but yeah, their best since October 31st.
I mean, it looked that way, and that's the thing. Like, I was a little surprised that the Raptors only finished with 100 points because it's like they
slow pace
offensive. Yeah, maybe that was just it. But I think part of that is just also Pascal taking his time. Like, there's one play where the Raptors got the stop. Fred hit it to Pascal early in transition. Because the Cavs had numbers back, they were able to double Pascal pretty much right away. Pascal kicked it back out to Fred, and then Fred just kind of looked around, saw where everyone was, and just threw it right back into the post for Pascal. This time, the Raptors were properly spaced and had enough guys in the front court. And Pascal just, made a move, bumped Chetty Osman, faded away to an area in the baseline where you just know Chetty, obviously being a smaller player, but also with that bump, he's not coming back to contest that shot. And so Pascal was just able to fade away for a jumper. I mean, it's a play where ultimately all you really got was a mid-range jumper with 5 seconds left on the clock. But there's got to be more like nuance to that kind of analysis, because that's not a bad shot at all. That's a mismatch, and you see star players all the time setting up the defense to make sure that they're in position. So, really impressed, man. Really
one
impressed.
other note to kind of tie the two ends of the floor together. You mentioned how important Pascal is in transition, in part because of his defensive rebounding. Last night, even with the Raptors not forcing a ton of turnovers, their frequency of getting out in transition with Pascal on the floor was way higher than we've seen with Pascal out. In fact, they only matched that twice the entire time he was out. So even though last night felt like a slower pace game, it was a slower pace game based on just the raw number of possessions. And the Raptors did, by their standards, a poor job forcing live ball turnovers. They were really, really good off of Cleveland misses. And Pascal's such a huge impact factor in that way too. There's just, I know we're kind of just glowing about the guy, but he's playing at an all-NBA level.
Yeah,
you just didn't have him for the last 10 games, and you immediately see helps the defense, helps the rebounding, helps the transition game, helps the half-court offense. Like, there's no area of the way the Raptors play and the level Pascal plays at where everything doesn't just immediately get way easier for everyone else, including Nick Nurse.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing. There were very few times in this last night's game where Nick had to call the timeout because the Raptors were in a scoring drought or because the Raptors weren't defending well. Like, it felt like they had control of the game all the way through, even in the first half, obviously, when the game was closer. The other guy that has been drawing a lot of headlines because he carried such a great load for the Raptors while Pascal was out was OG Anunoby. I think OG was still fairly aggressive with his offense, but at the same time, when I watch back on the film, obviously defensively did such a great job against Mitchell, right? We all know that, but offensively, it felt like OG could just settle into his role. It was so much more natural. Like, he scored, what did OG have last night?
He had 20 on 13 attempts.
Right,
So 4 of 6 on 3, 4 of 7 inside the arc.
Super efficient night, right? The 4 threes made is a great sign. I don't think he did that even one time with Pascal out. And a lot of that is just less in transition, less playmakers around you, him having the ball more often. He's not going to self-generate threes, right? He's more of a catch-and-shoot guy. Obviously, we saw him hit those 2 trailer threes, one from Scotty, one from Pascal. But even the rest of the game, the other 4 twos that OG was able to make, there was a high-low pass from Thad on a cut where he was able to duck in and score a layup. There was the tic-tac-toe passing sequence with
From
Pascal midair,
Yeah.
right? That was an easy dunk for him. Then he got a mid-range jumper attacking Evan Mobley. Step back, put it behind his back, and then step back for the jumper. I mean, that's a tough shot, but that if OG ever masters that, like, watch out. And then he had another mid-range jumper. Like, it was so smooth. He didn't have to work so hard for it. And my question to you, Blake, is like, do you think that him getting those easier chances and having had the reps now to do some of the harder things, he probably has more legs to hit some of these shots?
I think so.
That's my theory, at least.
And there's the reason you are patient with OG working on things in season, and the reason that you look for silver linings when a guy gets hurt, because what else are you going to do? But there is, it's the old Pascal during the Kawhi season thing of, okay, Kawhi's going to miss 22 games, and those are Pascal's chances to start slowly learning to take a bigger role. It's not just about eventually the reins will get handed over. It's about, okay, well, OG is going to average the same number of field goal attempts as last year. His usage rate isn't going to go up over 20%. Can he be more efficient in those and more comfortable? And can you keep him happy, because he does get the freedom to take a couple of those step back jumpers that we know he likes to have that in his package, and it can be a little awkward within the flow of the offense. But when a guy defends at that level and does all the play finishing stuff for you so well, that's when you're okay with, if he had missed both of those, like, who cares? He still had such a good game.
Yeah, of course. He's earned
it. There's a lot in there, and I think last night it wasn't even as far as you want to go in terms of what does OG's role look like offensively when everyone's coming back and everything's in place. But I do think that it's a good snapshot of, how does OG still get his offense with Siakam back? It's not really a huge problem, because he's going to be way more efficient. And there's going to be less room on volume, but more room physically on the floor for him to do that kind of stuff he wants to be empowered to do.
Right, because again, you compare the 8 shots that he made last night to some of the other games where he's made 10 shots, of late against Miami or against Dallas or whatever. Those games, unless OG was stealing the ball at half court and taking it in for a dunk, man, he had to take the punishment down low, play against a double team, hold off a bigger defender. It was just like so much work went into generating those baskets. Whereas when you look at his game last night, part of the reason he was more efficient, he could just finish, right? And then he can just pick his spots and attack. And I think that, the bigger thing too is, because we'll have a conversation about this after the break, is about what Nick is trying to do in terms of maximizing the team, right? And sometimes people kind of are concerned about, well, if this guy comes back, then the volume is going to be there for him, and maybe his stat lines won't look as good, and maybe we can't push our player agenda as much. That's not the point. The point is to make the team as best as possible. And the idea is to sort of, obviously, especially with your supporting guys, make them as efficient as they can be, right? Because the main guys, whether it's Fred, whether it's Pascal or Scotty to a lesser degree, and OG to a lesser degree, those guys are all going to generate, but you want your supporting guys to be super efficient. And we know that every single time OG's put into a supporting role, he's going to be super efficient on those.
Basically, when Pascal and or Fred are out, OG becomes a higher usage guy with like a 55-ish true shooting percentage, which is fine. But when it's more than fine, that's an average efficiency on like slightly above average volume, and he's still defending at an OG level. But when he's on the floor with those guys, he then becomes just like a lethally efficient number 3. And whether or not he has the third most shots, whatever, but the pecking order is Pascal and Fred first in terms of initiation and the option to shoot or whatever. It's tough, because it might be a little hard to have that conversation of, hey, you're going to take 3 or 4 less shots a game now because Siakam's back and Scotty's back, and we've got to work everyone in. But you might end up with the same number of points anyway. I don't think that's how. And then the other thing is, how else you get kind of more freelance opportunities in the offense is if you're up 10 or 12 in a game, you can do that a little more freely. And last night was maybe not the best example, because Cleveland kind of just hung around long enough. But you start blowing teams out, then you can do whatever you want on offense.
Yeah. No, it was a great game last night. And the only thing really is just to discuss sort of the management of the team, because we did see the Raptors change up their starting 5 last night. But we're going to take a quick break right here. You've been listening to The Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Welcome back to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm your host, Wim Liu, joined by Blake Murphy from everywhere, really.
What?
Actually, I was going
Do
to
you
say,
forget what show I'm on?
no, you're on Drive Time, but like, I'm just like, you're everywhere though, you know? Like, you're everywhere. I see you pregame.
I'm on that Michelle Branch.
What does that mean?
This song everywhere.
Oh.
Alex would have got it.
No, I know Alex is at home.
Alex
right now,
would be
just
over there chuckling right
punching
now.
the screen right
Yeah.
now. Damn. Yeah, he's a big Michelle Branch fan. I think it had something to do with it.
Her, I don't know. She has a new album out. It just like it. Kind of seemed like she got into the. She like did a deep like I'm gonna listen to a bunch of Fleetwood Mac and then like kind of sound like that.
That's is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I don't know. It's not my thing, but it like
Fair.
the bar is so high with that first album. You know.
Yeah. I'll let Alex answer why he's such a big Michelle Branch fan,
Yeah.
but I do know the answer, and it is kind of funny to think about.
This
in
is
a dark way.
Yeah, this is also for anyone who doesn't know. Will will only bring on guests on the show if you own a Michelle Branch T-shirt. That's why me and Alex are the regulars. V's probably got one somewhere too.
Yeah, most likely, man. He's got a sensitive side too. Okay, so let's talk about the rotations last night because Nick made a move that honestly we haven't seen him make that much, right? As much as we call him the mad scientist, something like that, tries different defenses. What he didn't really try last year was different starting lineups when he had
Ever.
Yeah, he had the same 5 guys in the starting lineup whenever they were healthy, right? It was going to be Fred, Gary, Scotty, OG, Pascal. And whenever those 5 guys were available, they all started, right? I think maybe there's one exception or maybe even not. I don't even understand. But anyway, those
Last year, the only exception I believe was the opener where Gary came off the bench. And even that was like an asterisk because Pascal was it, right?
Pascal was out. And also, I don't know. We just had
the
play Goran. Why was Goran in the starting
I
five,
don't
man?
know.
What was he even doing there?
And then like so this is actually like a fascinating Nick Nurse thing since he took over the job. Like he has always talked about wanting that lineup versatility.
Well,
and
he used to do it with Serge and JV, and then
Yes.
even Serge and Mark until Mark was just like, "Come on, I'm clearly better."
Yeah, and then he had the cover that year too of Kawhi missing a quarter of the season.
Right.
So you got to mix it up. But then the following year, it was the same thing. It's like, like the talk at camp was we have 7 or 8 starters and we'll just rotate them in and out on matchup. And then he settled into a 5 whenever they were healthy as well, which is fine. Like I think players would tell you there's a value to knowing your role and knowing when your minutes are coming and stuff.
Yeah.
But I think when like I don't mean this as in like Nick Nurse wouldn't have made this move otherwise, but I do think the injuries and multiple guys coming back at once was a helpful cover in I've wanted to try something different with the starting lineup. And it was a little tough to do that when we're an above 500 team and things are working with the regular 5. And now you have the cover of, well, Scotty and Pascal are both on minutes restrictions and it's too hard to juggle them both in the starting lineup that way. And we need someone who can, create a little bit more with the second unit because Siakam won't get to run those Siakam and bench units. Like it was just a really convenient timing for something I kind of feel like he's wanted to try for a little bit. Not necessarily this 5, but a different 5.
Yes, and I think he definitely tried it because, last night, Pascal returned in the lineup, Scotty returned in the lineup, other guys as well. But, he brought Gary off the bench. He brought Scotty off the bench. He started Thad and Juancho, who had been starting of late and honestly doing pretty well in their roles.
Those two have a nice chemistry together.
Oh, yeah.
You and I have talked a bunch about like Thad's always going to look better with like more starters because he makes things like he helps great players.
Yes, he does. Yeah.
And then there's also just like, not that Juancho isn't a good player, but for whatever reason, him and Juancho just have like a mind meld on the cuts.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's also just like, these guys know where they're going to be like productive in the league. Like, I don't think Juancho has any exceptional physical abilities that's going to allow him to be super successful at NBA basketball to the degree where he's going to continue to have a long career. And Thad has had a very long career. He used to be exceptionally physically adept, but now he's just kind of like, can kind of do it occasionally, but it's all craft and guile at this point.
So at this point, Thad Young is just a Spanish national team player, is what you're saying?
Oh yeah, I mean he might have to be the next Lorenzo Brown. Is what I'm trying to say here. Shout out to Lorenzo Brown, man. But anyway, Yeah, so that was the decision. Nick kind of explained it after the game. He's like, "Look, a whole bunch of guys coming back at once. A couple years ago, we brought a couple of guys back into the lineup, and they struggled, and the Raptors lost that game. So he's like, just trying to keep some balance as well with some of the starts. Like, didn't really give like one specific answer. And then he was also asked like, "Hey, did you have a conversation to break the news with these guys?" And Nick was like, "No, I just it was a shoot around. I was showing our defensive matchups, and that's where Scotty and Gary found out that they were coming off the bench, and that's kind of just that. And Nick's just like, look, I'm just trying to get the team to play as good as possible, and clearly they were able to get a great result last night. So he had the answers, but I mean, then when Scotty was asked about it, it didn't sound the same level of conviction maybe as the way Nick kind of gave his answer. So here's Scotty's comment.
It was a little different, for sure. It was alright. I don't know. It was I guess.
What's the difference for you?
I don't know. I'm just used to being out there to start the game, but I guess it was just a little adjustment. I guess it was just different. I guess.
Did it catch off guard?
Nah, I knew it was happening. It was just different.
You okay with it?
Yeah, it's whatever the scheme was, the game plan, it was fun.
So, I mean, first off, obviously it's a little bit hard for Scotty in that situation because those are some slightly difficult questions to answer at times. Obviously, it's a bit of an awkward thing, and he's not just going to come out and say like, "Hey, obviously I want to start." But at the same time, the way he was responding to it did kind of remind me of.
This is uncomfortable.
It was a bit uncomfortable. Yeah, the way he was speaking did kind of remind me of like, when your grandparents call and you haven't seen them in a long time and they just ask you how's school and you're like, yeah, it was all right, I guess. It's like, did you like it? Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. Like it was like, okay, all right. So yeah, I mean, Blake, what'd you make of those comments?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things there, and one is just like Scotty's energy's been a little different in interviews this year anyway.
Yeah,
like
and Nick's talked about it too, like twice actually now. That he's like, we want you to keep that same excitement that you had as a rookie, that every challenge was exciting for you. It's not the same because you go from that to like the Subway commercial or the Pixel commercial, and obviously those are commercials.
I think you mean Bowlway.
Sorry, Bowlway. Yes, Bowlway by Scotty. Have you had a Bowlway yet?
No, even if I had, I'm not giving away free advertising on the air.
That's right.
No way. So
better be Blake Way after this.
I think that it's a little strange. Like I think in an ideal world, like if you could craft what you wanted Scotty to say, yeah, I came off the bench, 2/3 of the time in my college. In my college year, I came off the bench in the playoffs last year, the one game that I came back after injury. And this is a way for me to impact the game with my energy in a different way. Like, sure, ideal scenario. That's something he says. And the message is consistent that I was like, well, injuries coming back, needed Scotty's ball handling with the second unit to better balance out the groups. And yeah, the energy factor. You also, though, want a player to want to start.
Yes, of course.
And Scotty still played 27 minutes last night, which I'd imagine was probably toward the high end of what he was going to be allowed to do. Siakam played 30.
Yeah.
I'd have to figure Scotty's load was right around the same, if not a bit higher. So it's not like his minutes were significantly down. It allowed him to handle the ball more. In terms of usage rate and how often he was initiating as a passer, that was more than what we had seen early in Siakam's absence, where Scotty Barnes was a little bit shied away from that, or was it just a little bit more conservative offensively? So I actually thought that the actual performance suited him, and I thought it was a good sign that the Raptors' best minutes in the game were still when Scotty was playing with the starters.
Yeah.
And I think you can take all that stuff and make this all a positive, right? Scotty's gonna get the starting job back eventually. For Wancho, I would imagine, and you use this as a learning opportunity and a building opportunity. As for the comments, like, yeah, he was probably a little bit disappointed, but Nick has also, like, publicly, like you said that they need a little bit more energy from him, a little bit more enthusiasm compared to last year. And maybe it's a little, like a tiny bit of a kick in the butt. Not that I think he really needs it, because, again, his play had been trending in the right direction anyway.
Sure. Yeah.
But I don't think it's the worst thing.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think he was definitely professional about it because it didn't affect his performance at all, like you mentioned, right?
Mhm.
Like, I think he did all the same things that you would expect him to do. I thought he was unselfish with his passing. I think at times he was even trying to force feed Chris when Chris was
Mhm.
having a bad game, and it actually led to some turnovers. But I actually like the intent behind that, right? Trying to get your teammate going on a tough night. Like, I like all that stuff. So I think he was professional on that front, and I also think that, like, look, I mean, I don't think it was an unfair question at all. I think some people were saying
No.
like, "Oh, it's not fair for the media to do this." I really don't think that's an unfair question, especially
A guy
because,
comes off the bench for the first time in the regular season in his career. That's a absolutely fine question to ask. And if you didn't ask about it,
Right.
it would be like, I get the, like, what else is he going to say? Obviously, he's going to say it was fine and it was different, but
that's not the point of the reporter, though. The reporter has to at least ask the question, and then you leave the option of the
Yeah.
response to the player, right?
and who knows? Maybe he says, "Yeah, I love it." And like back in college, I used to love coming off the bench because like right when my team maybe hit a log, like you don't know what he's going to say. Or maybe he says, "No, if I ever come off the bench again, I'm burning every bowlway in the city down." Like you don't know. You got to ask the question
That'd be
and
a
let
hell of an
him
ad.
say it.
What if preferred seeing that ad over
Yeah.
the other one? No, but seriously though, like I don't think there's any issue with that. And I think some people were like, well, they did ask the question 4 times. It's like, yeah, well, when a player asks like give short answers, sometimes you do see that kind of quick back and forth. To be honest, I didn't think any issue with that. To be
That's
honest,
fine.
but I think for the fan though, and also for us in the media, like we don't have to accept. Like we don't have to accept every single answer that he gives. Like we don't have to he doesn't have to be cheery with the situation. Like I don't think he owes us that, right? Like
No.
he can obviously he's a very ambitious guy. He's probably not looking forward
You
to coming off the
want your
bench like that.
guys, like it's the same with the OG thing in the offseason. You want your guys to want more for themselves.
Exactly.
You
Yeah,
want every guy on that team to think eventually they could be the number one on that team,
Mhm.
as long as to get there and while they're using that as their guiding mentality, they're still delivering in the role they're currently
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't see any issues here.
Nope.
If anything else, I actually think that it was a good move by Nick, not only because it accomplished keeping the minutes low, not only because it still got everyone to be productive, not only because they won the game, but also it's like if it does somehow spur them forward and get them to play the right way, I also don't mind that either. The thing is, to me, Scotty's not going to be coming off the bench for very long.
No.
I don't really see any issue with him actually starting. I think that maybe we can have a debate in terms of with Gary's spot in the starting lineup, but to me, yeah, Scotty healthy fits a lot of the gaps in the team. Like if you liked what Juancho Hernangomez did last night, you probably love seeing Scotty Barnes in the starting lineup. So yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, as much as that was a debate and topic, and it was more on Scotty because he got the post game interview and Gary didn't speak and stuff like that. Like, so people are sort of focusing on that response.
And look at who is like a bigger piece of the future of the
Yeah,
franchise, right? One
exactly.
guy could opt out of his contract after this season. The other guy's in the second year of a rookie deal and just won Rookie of the Year. So
Yeah, exactly.
that's proportionate to
Right.
me. The Gary thing is interesting because you can go back to, I mean, the moment they acquired him, you can go back to the start of last year. You can go back to the start of this year. The number of times I have made the argument that while Gary Trent has been good with the starters for the most part, and those units have been, neutral-ish.
They're bad to start the game. They're good to finish the game.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have long maintained that Gary Trent Jr. to the bench helps a lot of the more difficult rotation things this Raptors team faces, both because it's one more larger guy in the starting lineup that you don't have to worry about bringing like 5 power forwards in off the bench together. The bench units are always really starved for shooting. It's why every time, even though maybe he hasn't outplayed Delano Banton on balance, like every time Malachi Flynn comes in the game, you can feel that release of having a shooter on the floor and someone who can create their own shot. And I don't know. I look around the league at the type of players who really thrive in these kind of carry the bench scoring load roles. And there are a lot of guys like Gary Trent. And if Nick Nurse is as unhappy with Trent's defense as he sounded last week, Gary Trent's had a couple better defensive games, it should be said.
He even dove for a loose ball yesterday. There was a great play where it was a long rebound. Garland had the inside position, but Gary beat him from going from the outside, dove on the floor, saved it to Chris Boucher, and then Chris threw up a bad shot and missed it. But you
Yeah.
know what? Still, that's great effort from Gary, though.
Yeah, and that's great that he responded that way. If you're worried about his defense over the bigger picture, that's a little easier to manage in a second unit as well, where you're guarding, who you're guarding Raul Neto instead of Darius Garland. right?
Yeah.
Like that's a pretty big
That's
swing.
a pretty big difference.
And
yeah.
I don't mean any of this as like Gary's season last year was terrific. He
Yeah,
had
it
an
was
awesome
really good,
regular season. He took a step as a playmaker, took a step as a defender. The defensive side kind of trailed off by the playoffs, which was unfortunate, but he's really good. And his ability to space the floor for the starters in transitional or closing units will still be there.
Yeah.
His ability to create turnovers fits extremely well with the second unit. His ability to create his own shot is something he'll have more freedom to do with the second unit as well when they get into the half court. Again, I've said this since Gary Trent became a Raptor, and it's been for different guys at different times. Like it was Precious Achiuwa at one point. Now I'd say Thad probably makes sense as the fifth starter right this moment. But to me, he's just like, he's such a great on paper fit for what this second unit is right now and what it needs to kind of be a second unit that allows you to not play your starters 38 minutes.
Yeah. And, this is basketball. This is not hockey. Like, you're not doing line changes. You know what I mean? Like, Gary's going to still play with a lot of these main playmakers, right?
Yeah.
The thing for me is, like, look, I still really believe in Gary's talents. And to be honest, if he stayed in the starting lineup, it doesn't really bother me all that much. I mean, again, I think the Raptors can win with him in the starting lineup. They can win with him coming off the bench. These are not necessarily issues. And I think as long as he handles it like a pro, which I thought, again, he took the challenge on well last night and really did well in his minutes, took good shots too. There's no issues, right? But ultimately, it's about what sort of balances out the team. And I think on paper, especially with Thad's emergence, being able to play the five, one guy on the team who is not looking to score, who can just like help other players, it really does play well. Like again, watching back on the film, what Thad did as a pick and roll partner for Fred, there's another guy where Fred can just feed a guy, right? Because other guys, when Fred plays pick and roll, because the Raptors have limited bigs, he's got to serve them up a lob at the basket. Not any other situation, he's not going to be able to do something with it as a role partner, right? Except for Thad. Thad can actually do a couple of things as a pick and roll partner. Thad can be in the post, hit Wancho for a cut. Thad can be in the post, find OG for a high-low feed. Thad can be, in the dunker, and Pascal drives. Thad's man comes over and helps, and Pascal can shovel pass down low to Thad and finish the play. The point is, none of these are plays where Thad's looking to get his own shots or you have to service Thad. Thad's there to service the rest of the group, especially when you have that many guys in the starting lineup who can do something. So there's a real value to that.
And we talk about, hey, how do you get OG his touches or Scotty his touches or whatever when everyone's healthy? Part of that is better balancing the units. And the starter designation from a fan viewing experience or like what the final box score looks like isn't that big a deal, but it does help you set your rotations for the game. And if you're going to run an 8 or 9 man rotation, like the Raptors are probably going to do a lot of the time, I don't think it's going to get a whole lot deeper than that. You're always going to have 1 or 2 starters on the floor anyway.
Always.
And so Gary Trent is still going to get those minutes. He can still close games. He can still, maybe he's not a 34 minute a game guy. Maybe he's more of a 28 to 30 minute a game guy in that role, but I would imagine he'd be better in those minutes and the environment around. So again, this isn't to be negative about Gary Trent, who has responded well to the Nick Nurse criticism,
pro,
and
just like the way Scotty was,
had a really good game last night. I thought at both ends of the floor. This is just about if these are the bodies you have for the next however many games, and this is the 8 or 9 man rotation you're going to use. I think it all flows a little better with Gary Trent off the bench and Thad in with the starters.
Yeah, and again, it's not necessarily about maximizing each guy. It's about maximizing the team. What can create more efficient outcomes for you? What can lead you guys to play better defensively? And of course, you have to obviously balance that with the fact that Gary's set to hit free agency this summer, right? And that's not insignificant. And you can totally understand how people can feel one way or the other, just like you can understand that with Scotty as well. But at the same time, it's a team game. It's about servicing the end goal, and I think that's what all fans should be going for. It's like whatever gives the Raptors the best chance to win as a team.
Russell Westbrook is coming off the bench.
Steph Curry came off the bench, and they won a championship that year. He came off the bench during the playoffs.
Yeah, Russell Westbrook has come off the bench in 15 consecutive games.
It's also not that big of a deal.
It's not. As long as you get your minutes, you get your touches, and eventually you get your money, which I think Gary Trent is going to do. And in fact, if this helps your numbers and your efficiency and your on-off stuff, maybe it even helps you get more of your money.
Bench scorers get paid. Look at Tyler Hero. Look at Jordan Poole. Last thing I want to say before we go, I do want a press conference where someone asks Gary about coming off the bench and Pascal will be walking by and want him to say, "Hey, P, they want me to come off the bench." Shout out Melo back in the day. All right, that does it for us today. I've been your host, Will Lou. You've been listening to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Thanks again to Blake Murphy, our board producer, Derek Brandale, Frank Baraska for helping us with the YouTube stream. Talk to you tomorrow